Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is making meaning and what is available to us when we consciously and deliberately assign meaning or choose meaning, and also what kind of freedom might be available to us when we don't assign meaning. I think it should be a really interesting conversation. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells and your molecules and your electrons, and creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and gently rub your fingers against your palms. Feel the deliciousness of that sensation, the tickling, the tingling, and allow all that sensation to bring you present right here, right now, to this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Lisa. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about making meaning or meaning making. And I had a really interesting conversation with someone yesterday who had a tattoo that was very deeply connected initially to another person, and this other person has gone. Their relationship with this other person has been very fraught and is no longer a proximal relationship. And so the question was, what was the meaning of this tattoo and what were they to take from it? And what we were discussing is transformative meanings that could be assigned to it now that this person was experiencing a new phase of life. And I thought, this is really, it's so powerful in so many ways, because a tattoo is a mark. It's a mark that is an indelible mark on our bodies. And it's not really indelible. I mean, it can be removed, it could be marked over, right? So it was really interesting to be thinking about this, because our experiences are ways that we kind of get psychically tattooed, or um, uh, and we allow the meaning from our experiences to the meaning that we've created to define our experiences going forward. It could be that this tattoo would be a constant negative reminder of of a very difficult period or relationship, right? Or it could be that tattoo could then be an emblem of freedom, or it could be it could be anything. It really truly could be anything, and it could be nothing. And the nothing part is the challenging part to be thinking about, I think, because we as human beings are meaning making machines. We have something that happens to us in our lives, and oftentimes our first question is why? Why is this happening to me? And so when we ask when we ask the question why, we our our minds are like heat-seeking missiles. You give it a task and our mind just percolates and comes up with all kinds of answers depending on the context from which we view life, right? So if we're in a hostile universe, the why often gives us an answer of how we're being punished, um and if we're in a loving universe, then we might find a nurturing answer to why. So Lisa says, before my mom passed, my brother came over and showed her a tattoo on his arm. It said mom. When he asked my mom what she thought, her response was, I bet if you stand on your head, it says, wow. I love it. I love it. That's amazing. That's amazing. So now when he has that tattoo and she has passed, he has a constant reminder of wow and mom, and how beautiful to have those two ideas paired. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Lisa. So that's just a perfect example, perfect example of how we make meaning, right? So something like it could have been a sad memory, or if he allows himself to remember wow and the love, then it becomes like perhaps a delightful memory, hopefully. And so when we look at making meaning, I wonder what happens when we allow life to unfold without assigning meaning, because we really want to make sense out of the universe. And I think I was talking the other day about a client a friend who had a car accident on the way to work, and was just asking the question why. And the meaning that they were making, you know, what was for them, being a little bit in a hostile universe, like maybe being punished versus, being saved from an accident later or something. Who knows? But what if it was just unfolding? What if I think that the challenge with that is that we then good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here this morning. Rosalind says that perceptions in our minds create the conditions which our bodies respond to. Yes, that's really true. So we have whatever our experience is, and then we interpret our experience, and based on our interpretation we can create more suffering oftentimes, right? So because we resist the way things are and want things to be different, and make it mean whatever we make it mean, that feels painful. So Rosalind says making it safe to not have a defensive posture. Yeah, so the way that we think is what's going to dictate our feelings of safety, right? The context that we create for ourselves. And I think that the prospect of a universe that doesn't have meaning is terrifying, to human beings. I'm not saying it doesn't have meaning. I'm one of the, I kind of, I'm human. I attribute meaning to all kinds of stuff. Isabel, good morning. Good morning. So good to have you here with us. We're talking about making meaning, but what would it be if we didn't make meaning? You know, what if stuff just happens? I know we want to feel safe, and in order to feel safe, we try to anticipate what might happen. We try to control situations. We try to understand how things work so that that are not so scary, right? And I wonder, going back to the EST training that I took it for the first time in the 80s, that evolved to landmark education, which is still around and still changing lives, and I think changing the world in a big way. One of the things that at the end of the whole thing, we were told life is empty and meaningless. And I got so angry. I got so angry. And it was a very, very threatening thought, and made the world a scary place for me, you know, because I made that mean that it wasn't safe, or you know, whatever I made it mean. And I think that ultimately we are meaning making machines, and we give our lives meaning by by creating all these stories about what it's about. And I figure if we're creating stories, we might as well create stories that are empowering, and that make life joyful, right? Rather than stories that make life filled with suffering more than need be, right? So Rosalind says the storyteller would not allow for the me not to exist. So that's a little cryptic for Rosalind. You always come up with these really pithy statements and observations, and I'm just wanting to dig into this because I know you're so deep. The storyteller would not allow for the me not to exist. So in other words, the me in the story must exist. The storyteller must exist. And as I'm feeling into that, I'm recognizing that the story is always told from the vantage point of the storyteller. Even if the storyteller kind of tries to remove themselves from the story, the storyteller is the vehicle of communication, so the storyteller can't not exist. So I'm wondering if that's what you're saying, Rosalind, so that we are storytellers telling the story, the unfolding story of the world. And so this gets into the power of story, which is, Rosalind says, how does the I come to be? I think that's such a cool question, because we can say that the I comes to be by the reflection of the world, you know, where we're othered by others, perhaps. You know, the I is the individuated consciousness, presence, that is told that it's separate, right? When we're called by our name, when we're children, for example. It's that's a really great question. And let's look at the power of story, because what we are in the process of right now in this evolutionary point of humanity, what we are in the process of, as far as I can tell, that is the most evolutionary thing we're doing, is changing our story, is evolving the story of humanity. Because we've had the story of humanity as having dominion over the planet and over nature. And we've also had the story that it's a mechanical universe, and and a mechanistic universe, and we get to be reassessing that lens and that story, and as we recreate it, to be that we live in an interconnected, interdependent universe. And human beings, I said this the other day, and I it warrants further conversation, maybe tomorrow, that once we finally made peace with the fact that the earth isn't the center of the universe, and now we're starting to maybe begin to understand that human beings aren't the center of the universe, that we coexist and interconnect with all these other life forms. Hello, Elaine. So good to have you here with us. Elaine says you are, I'm not sure how to read this, but I'm going to say you are sourcing a dream. We all are, exactly. Or we are the source of a dream. Beautiful. Yes. So we are dreaming the world into being. In fact, there's an organization called the Pachamama Alliance, and they are very much about creating a new story for humanity, at least for Western culture, because the indigenous cultures have a story that is much more in alignment with the nature and foundation of life and being. But where was I going? I got a little derailed. Oh, Pachamama Alliance, their course is, they have a course called Awakening the Dreamer, Creating the Dream. Ah, thank you, Elaine. Elaine says, you are source dreaming. I love it. That's beautiful. So that we are dreaming all kinds of experience into being through this manifest form. I love it. So the awakening the dreamer is coming to awareness of our meaning making and of our foundational stories, and then allowing ourselves to consciously engage in the creation of the dream, rather than living through the inherited meaning or the inherited dream, the existing paradigm. We talk a lot about paradigms, contexts, meaning, story, because this is what we get to do in, this is probably our highest calling right now in the moment of transformation and evolution of life on this planet right now, and certainly in the life of humanity. is to rewrite our story and our role so that we come into right relationship with life. So Isabel says, Muji teaches an exercise for being the observer of the one who thinks, judges, creates stories, etc., until we are not none of that. Until we are none of that and can just be empty. Beautiful. Isabel says, we are source energy. Just be being. Well, that's what happens, right? When we allow ourselves to refrain from making meaning, when we are just presence, when we are life flowing through. And we may have glimpses of those moments when we are free of meaning. And then we get to be the flow of being, that energy in flow, life expressing itself through us. So I know Elaine says, as you become conscious and aware that you are source, dreaming, all experiences have, when you become conscious and aware that you are source dreaming, all experiences have value in the process of awakening to the one true self beyond the mind. Beautiful poetry and truth there, Elaine. Thank you. So when we can allow for all experience as source dreaming, it's an interesting paradox that kind of like a Zen koan that sort of catapults us into another dimension of awareness where there is a shift that, so this is making me think of the reading that I'm doing about regenerative development and regenerative design. And it was talking about evolution and resiliency, and that nature is not equilibrium. Nature is not a linear kind of continuum, and that nature needs disruption to prosper and evolve. And so the example was that the forests need fires in order to regenerate. And that's part of a natural cycle. And what I was thinking of is if everything is perfect and if we are part of nature, what if, and this is an outlandish idea to entertain, but what if all of our destruction that we have wrought on the planet is part of the perfect evolution? What if all the destruction that we've wrought is part of the disruption that we as part of nature bring us all the planet, all of nature, to a next evolution that's all in perfect unfolding? I don't think that gives us an excuse to say, okay, let's continue the destruction. But, you know, what's happening is that we've brought ourselves to a brink of global disaster, and and a lot of people are waking up and taking radical action to correct or to transform, to come to a new awareness about how we get to be on the planet. And perhaps this is the disruption that was called for to do that. Interesting prospect, right? So Elaine says, blessings all. Have a blissful now, all. Thank you, Elaine. Thanks for joining us. Always wonderful to have you with us. So I think, you know, it's really interesting. What if we challenge ourselves to think beyond, like, I think for those of us who are ecologically minded, it's very easy to feel that we've destroyed all possibility. You know, it's to be looking at humanity as a destructive force on the planet. That's part of the story. And what if we rewrite the story to say humanity can be a positive partner with the planet? What if we rewrite the story to say we can have a benevolent influence in nature and as part of this global organism? What if? And that's part of making meaning. You know, perhaps we had to get to this critical point to be able to wake up as a species, to come to a new awareness about how to be on the planet as part of a living organism, as part of a dynamic exchange of energy and life. What if? Another beautiful example of this kind of meaning making that can be transformative is, rather than feeling like it's game over, we can recognize it only took us a generation or two to create this devastation. What if we can turn it around in a generation or two? You know, what if we can transform it just as quickly? So I think this meaning making thing is something we get to pay attention to and look at. Does conflict have to mean enemies? Does maybe conflict can mean an opportunity for deeper conversation and deeper communication? You know, we get to make the meaning. We get to look at what we're creating and be conscious creators. Be conscious creators in developing ways of being that are life affirming. And when we're experiencing despair and suffering, then we can take that as an opportunity to look at the meaning that we're making about things and perhaps redefine it, readjust it, reevaluate it at the very least. Bring it present, bring it to our conscious awareness so that we then have choice about it. So with that, make it a meaningful day. And then I challenge you to make it a meaningful day in a way that is life affirming and feeds your vitality and a sense of joy and delight. Good morning, Dido. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you all for being with us. It is a privilege and a pleasure to have these conversations with you. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to please check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN One with the Earth, Enlightened World Living, And until next time, so much love to you. Hope to see you again here really, really soon.